Hey everybody, this is Haley. This is my end of the semester portfolio presentation, which I have titled Through My Own Eyes. W131 has been the first English class where I've actually written about myself and my own opinions, my own experiences, instead of analyzing a short story, a novel, like Brave New World or The Scarlet Letter, or doing a blind passage poem, like we did in AP Lit. In this class, I really had to focus on who I am as a person and as a writer, what my own opinions are, and guess how to portray myself and my personality through my writing. I'm just going to go step by step through each of the 4 major assignments that we did throughout this semester and share some of the challenges I faced while writing these, how I was able to overcome them, and some of the lessons I learned from each. Okay, so the first major assignment was the literacy narrative, and probably the biggest challenge I experienced with this piece was actually just picking what narrative I wanted to tell. The first day after we got this assignment, I actually went home and dug around through my memory box and I found a bunch of examples of poems and short stories I had written back in elementary school. And for my first draft, I ended up choosing something more recent. I wrote about during the summer between sophomore and junior year when I wrote a script to a murder mystery play that I ended up filming throughout the summer. And I had a really good time doing it, and I thought it was going to make a great story, but the more I thought about it, I realized that it really didn't have that much to do with reading and writing. So I ended up scrapping the entire first draft and starting all over for draft number 2. I ended up picking one of the stories I had mentioned in the brainstorming activity in class, in which I wrote about the time in 4th grade when our whole class was divided up into reading groups, and I felt that I should have been in the highest reading group, and I wasn't in there, so I made a point to prove to my teacher that I deserved to be in the highest level reading group. I learned the importance of picking a good story to tell, I guess picking the best story that answers the prompt, and that definitely helps make the rest of the drafts easier. If you've got a good story, it's a lot easier to revise your piece and meet the criteria. And probably the most useful skill I learned during the literacy narrative was learning how to explode the moment. So after watching that video about the teacher who had a student write about spilling a glass of milk on their sister's head and exploding the moment there, I practiced doing this throughout my entire paper, and I really think this is what made a difference. It definitely improved my paper far beyond what I've ever written before in any other previous English classes. So here's an example of how I changed part of my essay using the exploding the moment technique. Originally, near the beginning of my paper, I had Mr. Lanning, my 4th grade teacher, commenced rattling off the names of students in the lowest level reading group. In my revisions, in between the draft 2 and draft 3, I really focused on trying to express just how anxious I was, embarrassed that I might be listed in the low-level reading group. So here is my new and improved version of this sentence. My chest rattled and threatened to shatter as my heart pounded, trying to escape from its prison cell of ribs. Please don't say my name. Please don't say my name. I chanted this mantra over and over like a broken record in the privacy of my gelatinous, pink brain, hoping the repetition would make it true. As the unfortunate souls were named, I participated in the snickers and sneers directed at the lesser students, grateful not to be one of them. Mr. Lanning relentlessly resumed his public humiliation with the list of students in the 2nd lowest reading group. I squirmed in my stiff plastic chair, mentally on my knees, begging not to be appointed to the humiliating title of slightly better than the worst. I survived the verbal outing until he enumerated the names of students in the 2nd highest level book club. Charlie, Whitney, Zach, Haley. The stale breath I didn't realize I had trapped in my lungs flooded out with an audible And I made revisions just like this throughout my entire paper, and I really think that's what improved it so much. Overall, I definitely think the literacy narrative is the piece that made the biggest difference in my writing style and how I express my voice and my personality. So next up was the rhetorical analysis. And I chose to analyze Rita Pierson's speech, "Every Child Needs a Champion." And throughout writing this piece, I never really made any major revisions. Really, I just took so long to analyze each part of her speech that pretty much each draft was just finishing writing my essay, essentially. The strategy that helped me succeed in writing this was to read the transcript of her speech over and over and over again. I annotated, I highlighted, and I just made notes. To help me understand really Pearson's audience, I actually went over and interviewed my neighbor, who is a teacher in the Fort Wayne Community School system, because she sort of falls under the category of Pearson's audience, teachers who maybe need some motivation to help them love their job in today's world where there's so much pressure from national, federal regulations on education and expectations for students to do well, despite their differences in backgrounds. And after talking to my neighbor, I had a better understanding of the audience's point of view and how they might react to each anecdote and quote that Rita Pierson shared. And that really helped me to analyze each aspect of her speech and how they were emotionally playing with the audience and how they built upon each other, which is one of the main points that I made in my essay about the importance of organization and structure in a speech, and how maybe putting a certain anecdote at the beginning can have a completely different effect than if you put it at the end. Okay, so next up was the argumentative essay, and I wrote mine about germline gene therapy, which is taking a sequence of DNA and you put it into a virus, infect a person, and it's able to take out a piece of their chromosomes, their DNA, that causes a disease such as hemophilia, Tay-Sachs, sickle cell disease, and even breast cancer. And what happens is the bad DNA, which causes these diseases, is taken out and the so-called normal or correct version of DNA is inserted into the genome. Now, if that was confusing for you to understand, that's exactly how I felt while writing this argumentative essay. I definitely put the most work into writing this, and the most difficult part of this assignment was actually just understanding my topic. It's extremely complex and very scientific and medical, and it took a lot of research to understand exactly how this works, and some of the side effects, how effective it is, and all of the moral and ethical dilemmas associated with gene therapy. So my topic has one major pro for it, that we should allow germline gene therapy because it has the ability to cure genetic diseases. However, all the arguments against it, such as that it violates a fetus's right to remain genetically unmodified, or that it's unethical to so-called play God because you're messing with DNA, or even that it's unfair because it's extremely expensive and only the rich are able to afford it. All of these arguments are extremely numerous and complex, so my approach to this essay was, instead of explaining why you should do this, I decided to take all the arguments about why you shouldn't and prove them wrong. In between probably every single draft that I wrote, I came up with a brief outline of all of my arguments and main points and my reasons for and against certain contentions. And I constantly revised this, added to it, got rid of stuff that I didn't feel was relevant in between every revision that I made, since my argument was so complex that I felt like I needed to write everything down and keep track of everything while I was writing. So I learned about the benefits of using an outline to help organize your thoughts, and also to, I guess, consider using inductive reasoning instead of deductive reasoning when writing an argumentative essay. In this paper, I didn't state my topic sentence at the beginning of every paragraph. Instead, I tried to sort of explain the argument or the situation before I stated my own conclusions and opinions. My goal was to influence the audience, which is the FDA, to come to my own conclusion before I reinforced it by stating it, which hopefully would be the same, because I feel like that would be a more powerful argument than simply stating, here's what I believe and here's why I'm right, instead of leading them to believe a certain thing and then saying, you know what, I agree with you too, you have to be right. And I'm definitely going to consider using inductive reasoning from now on in any of my future college English classes. And the last assignment that we did was the op-ed, which I wrote about federal regulation on school lunches. Since we didn't spend a lot of time on this assignment, I really didn't get a chance to make many revisions. Like from the first draft to the second, I essentially scrapped the majority of my paper because Mr. Slater pointed out that I was using the slippery slope logical fallacy, and definitely can't do that, so I had to start over, and I had to find I had to find more sources to back me up, and more anecdotes, and not take such an extreme approach to my argument. And what I learned from writing this assignment is that it's important to keep up with the current news and what's going on in your local community and globally, since it does impact you and me. And lastly, that it's important to evaluate your own opinions. So don't just believe something. Really think about why you do, and is your own opinion even valid? Overall, I think my rhetorical analysis was my best piece because I was really able to understand how Rita Pearson was connecting with her audience, and I just feel like I did a thorough and in-depth performance of evaluating all of her rhetorical strategies, and specifically how each one impacted the audience and how they were able to build upon each other to produce a specific result. And I think my worst piece is my literacy narrative. While this was probably my favorite to write, and I had a lot of fun doing it and telling my story, it was very awkward in transitioning from the actual story and then to present day to show how this event affected me as a reader in the long run. And that is why I chose it to revise as my multi-draft essay revision in the portfolio. And overall, this is what I'm going to take away from W131. I'm going to explode the moment anytime I have to write a narrative, because it makes it that much more interesting to listen to, and including a lot more detail really helps convey the mood and the tone of the situation. Always pick a story that answers the prompt. It makes it so much easier to get all your points on the rubric and to make revisions if what you're writing about just fits with the prompt. Definitely don't procrastinate. I did that on the rhetorical analysis essay, and it definitely hurt me in the third draft because I didn't leave myself enough time to really make some decent and adequate revisions to my final paragraphs. Reflect on each draft. Doing this in the reflection section of the writer's notebook was extremely helpful. I was able to write out what the weaknesses were in each draft, what my strong points were, and what specific revisions I needed to make, and it sort of acted like a to-do list, so that I wasn't really concerned going into the next draft. I just knew, here's what I need to change, and it's all written down for me, so I could just check it off as I went. And lastly, write about a topic you're passionate about. That's what I learned in the argumentative essay. I definitely wouldn't have put as much time and effort into this piece if I wasn't so interested in gene therapy, which I am since I want to go into the medical field. Throughout the course of the semester, W131 has definitely been the most helpful English class in terms of me finding myself as a writer and what I believe in and how I express myself. I think this class has definitely prepared me for college and for my professional career.